September session for AI ethics experts webinar that we host every month, where we introduce experts to come share their expertise and the work that they're doing in this space. So the reason we decided to host this conversation today is because for all the talk and media buzz around AI, incorporating AI ethics into technology development continues to be challenging. Part of the difficulty is reconciling ethical principles with company culture. Another is alignment of ethical AI practices with business processes and objectives. So today in our September AI Expert webinar, we will go beyond rhetoric to dive into the practical challenges in implementing AI ethics in technology creation and discuss with our expert today solutions for addressing them. So for today's discussion, we have invited Dr. Stacy Hobson. Welcome, Dr. Hobson. Dr. Hobson is the Director of Responsible Tech Research at IBM Research. Dr. Hobson will share some of the work done by her team, including research to uncover ongoing challenges of practically embedding and operationalizing ethics, especially for large organizations. There's a difference between business to business and business to consumer space, and we will talk about that and dive deeper into it with Dr. Hobson. We will also discuss the practical methods and tools that her team has developed to support responsible technology creation. Dr. Hobson's group focuses on understanding the societal impacts of technology, promoting tech practices that minimize harms, biases, and other negative outcomes. Her prior research has spanned multiple areas, including topics such as addressing social inequities through technology, AI transparency, data sharing platforms for governmental crisis management, and risk management techniques for financial services. She has also authored more than 20 peer-reviewed publications and holds 16 US patents. Extremely impressive. We will post a link to Dr. Stacy Hobson's LinkedIn so that you can follow her work and engage with her directly. And again, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Stacy Hobson. Thank you for joining us today.
Great. Thank you so very much to Mia, to Jeanette, Catherine, and all of the members of the Women in AI Ethics team for the invite. I'm really happy to be here with you all today to have this amazing conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you. I know you're super busy, so I do appreciate the time you're taking today to help our audience get a better understanding and grasp of the challenges and also solutions of AI deployment in enterprise spaces. Can you start off with your impressive background? Can you share your career journey with our audience and what brought you to your current role at IBM?
Sure. So first, I've been with IBM for over 18 years, very long time to be with one organization, and it tells a little bit about my age. But I had a very brief stint as a systems tester for just about 1 year, immediately after my master's degree with IBM. And during that period, I had done some work that basically, I had been testing a large system and I saw some error messages that to me were not clear, clear enough that a user that was interacting with the system would understand well. So that kind of motivated me to go back to school to get my PhD and focus on neuroscience and cognitive science, to really think about people, how people think, how people interact, how people work, to really start to do research and focus on the intersection of technology, humans, society, and so on. So that was sort of the first motivator of me coming into this space. And then I joined IBM Research right after my PhD, and I've been here since. I've done lots of roles in IBM Research. I've worked on a lot of different projects, but my work has all been anchored around this focus on addressing problems that mattered for the world. So one of my earliest projects was shaped due to an incident that happened years ago in the financial services industry. Many of you all may be familiar that a large bank had a case where a small team of traders made a series of trades that impacted the organization and had a loss of about $5 billion. Note that I said billion dollars for that organization. Y'all can look it up. It's actually called the London Whale Incident. That's sort of the nickname for it. But if you're not familiar with it, it had a huge impact on this business from just a couple of trades that this small team did. So then the organization realized then that it was challenging to understand the impacts of some of the business operations or some of the actions of the employees on the full scope of the business. So that was my first research project. It was around broad scope financial risk. How do you do risk analyses and provide insights to the organization to understand how small changes can impact the whole business? Subsequently to that, I started looking at crisis management solutions and crisis management-based research for governments, for state level governments and local level governments. And this was motivated at that time due to a number of hurricanes that we dealt with on the eastern coast of the US. I live in New York. I actually grew up in South Carolina, but hurricanes are a huge threat to us. When hurricanes hit, especially at like the higher categories or the more severe hurricanes, lots of people die. People lose their houses, businesses are impacted, the environment is impacted, and it costs like millions and billions of dollars to rectify the damage from the hurricanes. So then I did research around crisis management and data sharing platforms for government organizations and rescue organizations that are trying to provide services and support needed to the communities that are potentially going to be impacted by a coming hurricane or after a hurricane has hit or any other crisis that may occur. How do you then mobilize the resources, the people, the data, the insights, the knowledge to provide the level of support that's needed? So again, motivated by something that really happened in the world and a pretty significant challenge. So that was sort of the way that a lot of my research focus and my research projects emerged. And I continue to do additional projects. And over time, I started to learn more and more about ethics, responsible technology, responsible AI, and so on. And for me, I tell everybody, as a Black woman, this was really close to home. Like a lot of the things that we had been seeing in the news, a lot of the harms that we had heard about, like I will probably never in my life forget about the example where a Black woman posted a picture online and she was tagged as a gorilla. I mean, like that is so hugely impactful and personally bothersome that these types of incidents motivated my interest in thinking very deeply about responsible AI, ethical AI, and what I could do, what my team could do, what we could all do together to address some of these issues and harms that we were seeing.
What you shared was so inspiring. So there are a couple of things that resonated with me. First is you are focused on human problems. This is not technology for the sake of technology. This is not technological issues, some existential risk of the future, maybe. But what is really dominating the headlines these days, we always are like, we are bombarded with information or bombarded with fears of what might happen. Your focus is now, the present. These are the issues affecting humans, especially in marginalized communities. Every example you gave. And also, you're bringing your own personal experience, your lived experience into a space which is dominated by men, is dominated by white men, and dominated by people who don't have your lived experiences. So when they're designing these systems, those views are not considered. So can I just say, like, so impressive, like everything you just shared. And that's what we need to hear at this time, because people are hearing a narrative in the media that it does not reflect reality. And a lot of our audience is also always trying to find, like, where is the space where I belong? How can I contribute? So thank you so much for helping us connect the dots between lived experiences, what's happening in the world today, and where they can play a role in this space. So I appreciate that. So my next question, I'm going to combine two questions that I have for you. This is a very important distinction, one that is lost because of media narratives and also what has been, again, getting hype, is this notion that we use AI technologies. There are many different flavors, but the ones which are dominating the news media is generative AI, where people are just creating these images or using it for a task. Like it's very consumer oriented. That's what gets the attention. But there is a difference, right, between business to business versus business to consumer. One big difference is you said impact. So when someone uses a chat GPT to create one image, it has an impact, but that is also on a smaller scale. However, when you're talking about technologies being deployed in the enterprise, that goes into the millions and billions, doesn't it? Like the impact of that. So can you talk about like what are the other differences in technology creation, adoption in B2B context versus B2C context?
Yeah, okay. So first, let me start off a little bit about B2C versus B2B. So B2C, of course, is business to consumer. So this is where you are creating technologies and solutions for individuals or consumers to use. So it's very much, I create this thing, I put it out there, and lots of people can touch it, use it. It's not to say necessarily public, because it may be, solutions or products that are sold, but it has usage and uptake and kind of visibility to a very broad spectrum of people and individuals. I work in an organization that is focused on B2B, business to business. So IBM, we work with other businesses to provide products and solutions and services. So one of the key things here is the differences in how people think of their direct or their first line stakeholders. B2C, your stakeholders are the users, the consumers, the people who are going to touch your app or your product or your solution. For us, our immediate stakeholders are business users or business people doing, things in HR, people doing kind of like technology projects within a company. And just as you said, Mia, these are very large enterprises. So they run products and services, and they do things that support consumers, but the first line from me to them is business to business. So why is this distinction important? When people talk about like responsible AI and ethical AI, and especially when you talk about engaging stakeholders or engaging diverse users or impacts, I'll talk a little bit about like participatory methods and focus groups as well, but when you want to think about how to include perspectives or needs of the people who are going to use your products and services, you sometimes have the ability to go to the target group or to think about the individuals or to try to get feedback from the people who are using the products and services. In working internally with some of our colleagues and talking about ways that we're trying to drive responsible AI very early on, like at the design phase of a solution or at the early stages of formulation of a research project, we also encourage people to think about indirect stakeholders, not just the people that they're interfacing with in the business as they're creating the solutions, the business users, but how will this business use these solutions and how can they touch people later on? How can these indirect stakeholders have their perspectives considered and embedded too, to ensure that we're not having unexpected or unintended impacts through this kind of indirect engagement. So that was one of the things that we discovered in our research, like making people aware of kind of the indirect stakeholders and like how do they think about them, how do they design for them, how do they account them into the process of the technology design, development, or the research work that they're doing. So that was a huge finding for us. And we work a lot internally with colleagues to help them think about this as well.
Incredible. So here's a fun fact. I've always worked on the enterprise side. Most of my career has been the enterprise B2B side. And
Uh-huh.
I always find it interesting that that nuance, the difference between the two, which is a big one, it's not even a nuance, that's missed by a lot of
Mhm.
people. And I feel like what you're pointing out is your stakeholder, you're 1 degree separated, right, from the end
Mhm.
user. Whereas B2C, you're directly in contact, so you can get that feedback. But your stakeholders are the businesses, and the businesses have millions of users, thousands of millions of users. So that makes it even one step further away as you're designing these. And I also have to say, personally, I feel that B2B, from my experience, is not very sexy or exciting. I have done some work with IBM, and IBM has also supported some of our work in the past, women in AI ethics. And I found that there are so many women at IBM who have led the charge of creating responsible AI toolkits. Back in the day, this is not a new thing for IBM, and it often gets glossed over because it's not exciting and fun. It doesn't make the news, it doesn't make the media because it's hard
And I
to
don't think
promote
there's
like
visibility.
a
There's also
practice.
not
Yeah,
visibility to
to
just
respect.
the regular everyday person to the types of things that we do. But yeah, but continue. I didn't mean to
Exactly.
interrupt, but yeah.
No, please. Exactly. And the thing is, I do want our audience to walk away with this realization that as they are planning out their career journey or thinking about where do I want to make an impact, I think this is an important consideration that do you want to work directly with the users? Because that's a different space and different ways to look at responsible AI. But then there's a different way of looking at enterprise and business to business space, because I feel that's where we are headed, because that's going to be such a critical space, right? So that's with that, I'd like to ask you what are the challenges other than being 1 degree separated or 2 degrees separated? What are the challenges, the practical challenges of embedding and operationalizing AI in these business contexts?
Yeah. So first I want to just give like a quick example. I don't know how many of you all remembered from years ago, there was this slogan of moving fast and breaking things. It was a slogan that came from a tech company at the time where they were just like, hey, we're all about our employees just kind of like creating products, creating solutions, and getting it out there as quickly as possible. And there was this notion of get it out there, test it out in the wild, and make improvements or fixes once you see what's happening, like once it's already out there. Well, that kind of mentality has led us to many of the problems we're seeing now. When you just put things out there and you're not very intentional in focusing on responsible AI practices, on ethical considerations, and so on, that can lead to a lot of these harms that are in most cases unintended. I don't believe the worst of people that you're putting out technologies to harm people. I mean, some people are, but I don't think that's the case for most organizations. But when you do things very quickly and you don't pay attention to, diverse stakeholders, to, the people who are going to use or be impacted by your solutions, things go wrong. People are harmed. Livelihoods are impacted. People die. Like there are lots of negative impacts. So going back to your original question, like what are the challenges in embedding, these efforts practically into the business? First is around culture. So I give this example of moving fast and breaking things because the culture that exists within your organization, the things that your leadership says, and whether or not they prioritize ethics or responsible AI or responsible technology is really critical to how the organization and the people in the organization will behave. If the culture doesn't support this, the importance of responsible and ethical practices, then people aren't going to do it. So that's the first, I think, challenge, making sure that the right culture exists within that organization. Or if you're doing this type of work and the culture doesn't exist, how can you change that culture? How can, the leadership in your organization work to change the culture as well? Second is around incentives. And incentives go very hand in hand with culture. So if your leadership really believes in responsible AI and really, puts a focus on that and talks about it, then the incentives will also be paired with that, ensuring that people feel that they can speak up, ensuring that as we're focusing on speed or as we're focusing on delivering, products and services and being first and innovating and so on, that you can do so in a way that is responsible. So I want to say I'm not against speed and innovation. That's critical. Like people understand the need to innovate and innovate quickly, but do it responsibly. Pair that speed with consideration of ethics at every single point in the cycle. Design, development, deployment, test, think about ethics, think about responsibility, think about your stakeholders, and so on. And the third aspect is one I mentioned earlier, understanding the stakeholders, not just the direct stakeholders, the people that you engage with, or the people that came to you kind of saying, I need your help, or I need you to design the solution, or I want to purchase this product that you have. But think about the ways that that product or solution or tool or whatever will be used in that very immediate sense, but also all of the downstream impacts, uses, the edge cases, the communities that you're not a part of, that you're not as knowledgeable about, and you may not have initially thought deeply about them and their unique considerations as you're doing these solutions. You got to be more intentional about identifying and really addressing the needs of a broad spectrum of stakeholders. So those are just 3 examples that I'll give practically of the important, considerations that you have to think about when trying to embed ethics within your organization.
Exceptional. Thank you so much. I'm just saying, like, so many of your points are resonating with the audience. And especially if you think about the environment we are in right now, it's the hype is really overshadowing the promise. And I liked that you pointed out that there is a difference between moving fast and moving fast responsibly. And I feel like nuance is lost because it feels like the only options that are out there, and which is absolutely wrong, is that move fast, break things, or move slow.
Yeah.
But what you're presenting is there is a third way that you can move fast, do it in a more responsible way. Don't just be throwing products out there willy-nilly. Don't be exposing people to these harms and these risks because lives are involved, right? And I think it was Tawana Petty who first said that when you're moving fast, breaking things, those things are human beings. So you have to be so careful. So I completely agree and 100% agree. And that's also, again, it is important to have a cultural mindset to introduce some of these practices, but it does help when you have leadership who is committed to it and has this approach which is pragmatic business needs, but we also have to balance the needs and the harms and prevent those. Brief minute to just welcome folks who might have joined a little late. Hello, I'm Mia Shadand. I'm the founder of Women in AI Ethics and Weight Loss, and I'm your host for today's conversation with Dr. Stacy Hobson from IBM Research, and we are talking about the challenges and solutions for embedding responsible and ethical AI practices in business contexts. And our volunteers are in chat and they have shared LinkedIn profile and other links to Dr. Hobson's work, Stacy's work. And please follow, engage with her work because this is extremely important in making sure that we are moving beyond talk to practice and we are moving beyond hype to operationalizing AI in a more ethical way. So that said, on the move on to the next question that I have for you, Stacy, which is you mentioned participatory research methods. How do these affect research quality and output? Like first is what does that mean, participatory research methods, and then also the link to research quality and output.
Yes, thank you. So one thing I want to mention is that a lot of the work and the research I'm describing today is done by the members of my team. Like I have an awesome team, like absolutely amazing, very diverse global team with members in Brazil, the US, Switzerland, and also the UK and so on. And so one of the members of my team really wanted to think deeply about how do we engage more people with diverse perspectives, and how do we help educate people who are doing technology design and development practices around the stakeholder needs and considerations that go beyond the communities that they're a part of or that they're very much aware of. And so there have been initiatives in like other domains, like people talk often about focus groups, like you bring people together, like if you're launching a new, like let's say food product or something, like you bring people together in a room, you have them taste it, and you ask them for their feedback. And in research, and especially around like technological kind of areas, there's this notion of participatory engagement or participatory methods where you do something similar to focus groups. You tap into a broad broad and diverse set of people to get feedback on the design or the ideas around a solution, or after you've created like a proof of concept, or you have a test version, you have them use it, you have them give feedback. And one of the values of this is that this is how you get the perspectives, the needs, and the input from more diverse communities. This is how you learn about the types of considerations that you may not think of from your own kind of individual perspective and your own communities that you're a part of. But as one of my employees started doing this research, there are some concerns with how participatory methods are done. It's like, hey, let's invite people, let's get their feedback, let's send out a survey, let's do these things. And then as researchers, we write a wonderful research publication with the findings, we submit it, we get it accepted, and the authors are the people who conducted the research. And there is this power dynamic that people don't always talk about. It's like, okay, the researchers can get the input, ask the questions, decide what input to keep, what input to discard, what things to highlight. And in some cases, the people who are participating are rewarded. Maybe you get like a $20 Amazon gift card, or you get like a free lunch voucher or something like that, some like nominal, way of saying thanks. But then the people who do the research they get publications, they get notoriety, they get all these things. So I'm saying all that to say, some of her findings were that we should think about the power dynamics in the participant and researcher kind of model. So instead of having the participants as just kind of laboring workers, why don't we elevate them to the same level of us as researchers? So we're on the same level. It's not like I'm writing the paper or I'm coming up with these findings, but we are a collective that are working together to think about technology, to do technology design, to provide additional perspectives and make solutions as inclusive as possible. And so they did something that I thought was a bit revolutionary. One of their first research publications was authored by, I think, 20-something people. Everyone who participated was an equal author on that research project or that research publication. And I can tell you the first feedback they got in submission, like the reviewers were like, what is like they were a bit surprised in that the model was different. But I can tell you the people who participated valued their ability to be an equal contributor, have an equal voice. It was to me revolutionary. And I really, really liked that work. And so they continued some of the work, and I thought it was very interesting. And so I know your team is providing some of the links to the publications, and I think the one or two papers there are fascinating for others to read. But it really talks about like not continuing this power dynamic of the people who have power, or the people who can make the decisions or decide what is okay versus what is not okay, and to really shape the narratives in the way that they want, but giving everyone an equal say and equal contributions to the output of that work.
I honestly, again, so many people are loving this approach, myself included. It's so equitable, and it is so it is the approach we need in order to address some of the flaws of the research process,
Mhm.
which is it can be exploitative, it can be extractive. What you're doing is making sure that the process is equitable, is inclusive, is justice oriented. It's not just using people for that input and just forgetting about that. It's just such a fantastic approach, and I hope more organizations and more research organizations use that. As a non-academic, I'll be honest, we do find sometimes the academic spaces tend to be designed for academia. The research is done in a way that only suits academia, which means that those results, there's great, fantastic research being done across the board at IBM, at other organized companies, tech companies, universities, but that link between that research and community has always been missing. It's like a gap. that, like you said, the papers are presented at conferences, but then what? How does it actually make change? How does it change things? And this is how you're doing it in a very real and meaningful way. So can't wait to the research paper that you've shared. We are sharing all the links to all your work with our audience, and I'm sure as they start following you, they'll also get access to other resources that your team will be publishing. And I also love the diversity aspect of your team, that you're not just, it is not just a US centric view, because there's also a challenge, right? It's always a global north design view, but your team is diverse. So you're bringing in input from other parts of the world, because let's face it, technology is global. The solutions are used globally. Then why would we only use one segment of population's perspective, of the global population's perspective? So everything
I want to
is
share one
like,
other thing
love
there
it.
around
Yeah.
diversity of the team. So we're diverse from a geographical perspective,
Mhm.
identity perspective, kind of intersectionality perspective, but also from a methodological perspective. So people on my team have backgrounds in computer science and mathematics as expected, but also history of science, also political theory, neuroscience, cognitive science. Like we have a lot of humanities areas and so on. And so for me, it was very important to have different perspectives from a research background or methodology, consideration as well. It does lead to challenges at times, but I think it's more reflective of the real world. When you have people with different backgrounds and expertise and interests and identities and communities and so on, you have to figure out how to navigate all of those differences. And that's where we have challenges in trying to reconcile the methodological differences, but it leads to really great research, really great conversations, and it mimics some of the realities of the rest of the world.
Absolutely, because the world isn't just homogeneous. The world isn't just one segment like which looks the same, talks the same, comes from the same background, speaks the same language, right? Like what you are, like you said, you are reflecting the diversity of the world we live in. And
Mhm.
that's exactly the approach we need going forward. So I can't even begin to describe how inspiring everything you're saying is for me personally, also professionally, because our work is focused on not just the STEM, folks with STEM background, which is important, but we believe there's like this entire breadth of expertise out there, lived experiences, but also professional expertise that needs to be considered for these products, because we are seeing a lot of ethical blind spots. Because the typically when you see ethical blind spots, I always think about who was not included in this conversation, right? That's the first question that comes to mind, and you're addressing it spot on right at the beginning. So I have two questions, and I'm going, one is you've addressed some of this already, but are there other ways that we can address this principles to practice gap so we can build more responsible technologies? And we do have a paper that your team has published, or it's from your research, responsible and inclusive technology framework. Could we talk a little bit about more about that? What does that
Yeah.
include and how it can be implemented?
Yeah. Okay. So my team, when we were originally founded about 3.5 years ago, I really wanted us to focus on kind of frameworks and methodologies and also tools that could help people in exactly what you're saying, going from just kind of this, thought or conceptual or theoretical perspective around what ethical AI is to actually driving it within our organization and driving it in the broader research community. IBM has had a longstanding history around, ethics and so on. Y'all can read about the ethics board. We have had a global leader for AI ethics probably for over the past 10 years and so on. So this has been a very important area for our company. And we also put out the principles of trust and transparency. So like many other organizations, everyone put out like their principles on responsible AI or responsible technology. But one of the things that really keeps me here and energizes me is that we just didn't put out principles. We actually, created teams like mine or other teams in the organization and our business units and so on that were really focused on driving these principles internally, like making them actually actionable. Like, how do we embed this into our organization? How do we make this part of our daily practices? How do we make sure that everyone is not only knowledgeable about the idea of ethics or the practices and principles we've defined, but that we're actually doing it. And so to me, that is another thing that we've looked at. Like, how do we, one of the things that we did was work with teams to say, okay, how do you create the spaces and do the things every single day that keep ethics and responsible AI at the top of your mind? So one of the things that a subgroup of my team created was a card game. So they actually researched practices of how people worked, development teams and so on. And they said, what are ways to not only teach people about ethical practices and embedding them in their everyday work, but to make it fun, make it something that people actually like. So we created a card game that was sort of modeled after like the suits of, traditional deck of cards. So like the four suits and, there's questions. And so like when you're starting a new like research project or a new technology project, you get together, you brainstorm, you have these sessions, and then part of it could be this fun thing of asking some of these questions. Who are the stakeholders? Are there people who could be impacted beyond the group that you just thought about? And like all these kind of cool and fun questions that were embedded. And a lot of people actually commented that they liked the game. It was, a bit of an icebreaker or a way to kind of break the monotony at times of doing like very deep technical work and just elevating the conversation in a different space, but it also made them more reflective about the things they did in that particular project, but also carried on to their other work. So when the team members suggested creating a card game, I'm like, interesting. Not sure if, I would have suggested that, but let's go with it and try it. And so we did open source the card game and made it available to people. So that was one of the things. We also did sort of an actual framework for responsible technology practices and development. And it had like 80 questions. And so he leveraged a subset of those questions in the card game, but we also open sourced the full framework as well with an API so that people could use it in their own ways in trying to embed responsible practices within their organization. So those are just two of the examples of things that came out of our work around creating frameworks and reusable methods, and the importance for us in making it available to the world to use and extend, critique, revise, whatever ways that people think are useful to them.
Incredible. And I have the same question as many in the audience. They're asking, where can I get this card game?
So I have good news and bad news. The good news is that the card game was open source for quite a while. I believe that the link that we had been using is not hosted anymore, but I will check into that and see if there's other ways that we can make it available to everyone. But it was an interactive card game. So actually you clicked on it and it kind of like showed you the cards, and then it's like, here's a question, ask the team, or like it was pretty fun when our team members did it. But if the current link isn't available, I'll find a way to make sure that we grant access to people to it again.
I love it. Thank you. I'll just say this, I've been doing this work for a while now, and one thing that has always been frustrating and challenging is uh, it's so important to get people engaged. And that lack of engagement can be addressed with cards and engaging tools because people think everything has to be digital. So
Mhm,
when you're in a room with people, do you really want them to be in front of a screen again? Like,
mhm,
and also the fact that it's accessible, it doesn't need a digital connection or Wi-Fi. You can be sitting
mhm,
with a room, it connects you to other people in your team, connects you to stakeholders, it gives you something to talk about and discuss. And I like how it encourages thoughtfulness, like you're being thoughtful, intentional. I love everything about that concept. And actually, even we are thinking more and more in terms of non-digital ways of interventions,
mhm,
non-digital resources and tools, because there are so many environments where a non-digital tool, a resource like that would be so valuable to bring these teams together, get them aligned, and even get that human to human connection. So looking forward to getting the link and see how we can get that out to our audience. So one thing I do want to talk about, and which has been super, it is a critical piece that is often missing in these conversations, is the workers, the labor. What I have appreciated about your work is you are recommending and proposing a more labor conscious approach when conducting these participatory, I need more coffee, methods research. And you even have a paper on this, and we'll share the link shortly. Could you help our audience understand, like, why is this? It seems intuitive, but labor often gets um, pushed aside, or is this an afterthought? Can you talk about why this is important to include a labor conscious effort approach in research?
Yeah, you brought up a really important word earlier, and that is extractive or extraction. Going back to the example of kind of participatory methods and the importance of participatory methods and focus groups as a mechanism to get more diverse perspectives and to understand needs of very broad communities that extend outside of your own. One of the reasons for that is to make sure that we're not propagating some of the harmful practices of, the power dynamics and so on. But again, in doing the focus groups or in doing these participatory engagements, we can't ignore the amount of work and contributions and labor that it takes on the people who are participating as well. And when they don't get a share in the value or the benefits of their participation, like for as researchers, the benefits often are the publications or the external eminence or the recognition from the research community or recognition from your organization. Like all of these things are embedded in our research culture and how we do the work that we do. But we have to think more deeply around what are the values for the people who are being asked to participate, and how do we ensure that what we're doing is not extractive in nature? We're getting value out of them, we're getting their knowledge, and we're giving them nothing in return. Or just like, kind of these assurances that, oh, you providing your input is enough. It'll make our products and services better, and then we'll go off and sell it and make lots of money and leverage the knowledge that you provided. So one of the papers was really by the colleagues on my team was really around rethinking the values and the ways to provide benefits back to the people who are laboring or participating in these research engagements or in these focus groups and so on. How do we elevate them and provide similar levels of benefits to them as we as researchers see in actually conducting these focus groups or these participatory engagements and writing the papers and getting the eminence?
I was reading about your research paper on the best practices or community-based practices from road and driver safety. Wow. Though, even if you don't know anything about artificial intelligence and people in our community, some of them are experts and others are experienced, but some of them are new. And I love that you're grounding this in safety practices which already exist and also with the community lens. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So again, this is work done by employees on my team, and it was very interesting as we were having these discussions around, safety practices and so on. And as I mentioned, my team is very diverse. So the person who led this work has the background in history of science, so a very humanities-based background. And I have to tell you, we talked about sort of community-based safety and the things that our team had learned. Like this employee had done like archival research and read, historical records, and they studied, road safety, driver safety, aviation safety. And they started to talk about when safety mechanisms that are created through, legislation or, organizations or groups that are responsible for this area. In this case, it was transportation. And they gave two very specific examples from the Southern US and also from an example from Colombia in South America, where there were transportation initiatives that were done, and then safety mechanisms were built into them. Like if you think about cars, seatbelts are built to help with safety, or road signs, speed limits, stop signs, all of those things are built to help with driver and road safety. But in actually both of these examples, the communities themselves or the drivers banded together to come up with new safety mechanisms to address areas that were not covered by the mechanisms that the organizations had put in place. So it was this like ground up, like kind of just like natural, like growing of safety mechanisms that were critical to the people who were on the roads, who were driving, but the people who had the oversight or the responsibility of providing that, I'm gonna liken this to technology. So the applicability here is like when we're creating technology, we have to think about, other needs of our stakeholders and peoples in the way that we may not consider like safety requirements or the realities of what people are experiencing as they're driving. So, how do we think about that, understand that, and put in place the right mechanisms to account for those things as well? So, in these cases, in the transportation setting, um, the colleagues on my team kind of gave very specific examples of how these drivers banded together to create new safety mechanisms to protect them in ways that were necessary and the oversight groups had not thought of.
That's
So I would encourage
fantastic.
people to read the paper. It's also very interesting. The first time they gave me the paper and I read it, I was like, this is going to start a conversation because it's very different than research papers in the traditional, like kind of tech
Mhm.
communities or the responsible AI communities. It was very much written in this kind of language of a humanities-based and historical and archival-based kind of research. So it was very different and refreshing. And we actually got a lot of good feedback about, this paper and how important it was to the discussions around experienced safety and community safety and so on.
I'm not surprised at all about the great feedback you received because I think we are realizing that the technology-based approach to solving these problems is now working. We need a more community-centered approach, and also why reinvent the wheel? We have worked on safety, we have safety lessons, we have best practices from other technologies, other deployments, other spaces, which we could incorporate. So I love how you're bringing in all of these different perspectives to solve an issue, which basically I feel like needs and building AI the right way, building these systems and technologies the right way. I'll be honest, I'm also in New York and it is humid and rainy here. So I'm just like
Yes.
sweating pillows. I don't even understand what's going on. It's supposed to be fall. So we do have a few questions. So I'll jump right to them. Uh, Great questions from Marie. How can the ethical AI be measured and monitored at deployment level, just to ensure the good intentions actually come to fruition to the B2B and B2C level? Thank you. This is a great question.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. When I talk about like sort of the methodologies and the frameworks that we deployed, I think a lot of people do things kind of like checklists, like providing checklists to teams, like have you done these things? Have you thought of broader stakeholders and so on. One of the things I did not mention earlier was another tool that our team created. It's the impact stakeholder impact mapping tool. So we actually provided a tool to IBM clients, also internally, where people can do this exercise of mapping the incentives and the interests of three different groups: self, like your team, your organization, yourself; your business, your broader organization; and stakeholders or society. And as you start to think about these broader stakeholders and start to consider their needs and so on, like, actually using this tool to document and highlight what their needs are and how you're embedding them or considering them into the practice, that's, really critical for us as well. And I think has been well received. We've had like over, I think, 400 people use that tool since we launched it, and we made it available like internally and in the work that our design team does with clients around responsible and ethical AI. But yeah, so there's checklists, there's tools like this one and other tools that are available. There's also things around just auditing tools, or my team also had outside of the actual tool, an impact assessment kind of questionnaire. How do you think about the risk factors for negative and harmful impacts, and what mitigations you can do to minimize those potential harms? So I think there's lots of tools out there from our team and other teams as well. But I agree with the importance of being able to actually identify that people are doing things to drive more responsible practices.
Absolutely. I love that it's time. We have resources, there are tools. It's time to start putting them in practice. So that's
Mhm.
definitely positive. We only have 1 more minute, so I'm going to wow, so many questions. I'll just go with the easiest one. Is IBM Impact Mapping tool available externally? It's
Yes, I will make sure that
okay.
your team gets the link to that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the question. What about accounting for the indirect effects of technology through unethical mining of raw materials? Might be a little bit not related to our conversation because this affects every AI system. So do you have a comment or any
Yeah, I'll say,
feedback on
so we
that?
do have research teams that focus on sustainability. I was actually
Mhm.
speaking to 200 people in our, focused on sustainability across the organization last week. So I would say Google some of our work around like sustainability research and so
Yeah.
on, and you'll see some of the papers or some of the insights from IBM around the intersection of kind of like research and sustainability and AI and so on.
Okay, sadly, we have a few more questions, but sadly, we will not be able to get to them. So I will just say thank you, Stacy, so much for joining us. It was such a pleasure. Again, one of the best conversations I've had during this series, and I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the invite, and thank you to everyone who joined. If you're interested in this space, continue to engage in communities like this one. I appreciate all of the hard work that y'all are doing that is not often, recognized, but thank you to, your community and to everyone else that attended today.